Hello and welcome back to Empyrion Galactic Survival, and welcome back to Reforged Eden. This is the 1.7 version of Reforged Eden. Now, at the time of recording this video, that version is not out to public release yet. Revian and Vermilion are kind enough to allow me a early test version, and this has allowed me to get a view of the changes to Reforged Eden that are going to be coming up and impacting everyone, and especially everyone's favorite builds that you might use to play through this wonderful scenario. Now, if you're not familiar with Reforged Eden, I did a video a little while ago explaining what the hell it is, so I'll link that up there so you can go and check that out if you like. Now, what I'm going to do in the rest of this video is show you guys what sort of things you're going to need to do in order to make your ships that you like to use ready for the new version of Reforged Eden, because there are quite a number of changes and there are quite a number of modifications that you're probably going to have to make to your favorite builds. So what I've done here is I've brought in the Vendetta, which is a early combat capital vessel that I like to use to do a lot of the kind of mid to late game combat. It doesn't require any of the special auxiliary cores or quantum cores that you need to up the CPU, but beyond the sort of the default extensions. I've also got a number of ships here that I've already modified for Reforged Eden, so we can see what I've done with those. And at the end of the video, I spawned in a vanilla ship that is just stupid. This is my old Gladiator build. It goes way over CPU, and we're going to see what kind of options we have within Reforged Eden to make this thing actually a possible build to use. So there we go, that's the plan. Let's go back and start with the Vendetta here then. So this, like I said, is a 2.1 million CPU ship, combat ship, but we can see straight away that due to the modifications that have been made and the rebalancing of CPU that Vermilion has done, we're over CPU. We're about 123,000 over the limit of CPU, which is going to really affect the efficiency level of our ship when we take it into survival mode. Now, unfortunately, obviously being in creative at the moment, all that stuff is off. But we know that we need to get it within 2.1 million, which is what you need, from the basic core extenders that you can have in Reforged Eden. There are some other things as well that you might notice when you spawn your ship into Reforged 1.7. For example, down here, our shield capacity is only 6,000, which is garbage. It's complete garbage. So not only are we over CPU, we're now underperforming in shield, and that is due to several changes in this version. The main one I'm going to show you now is the changes to shields and how they work. You might notice in the item menu when you get to it that the shield arrays are not the only shield related items in there anymore. There are also these capacitors and chargers. What Vermilion has done is he has made the cost of shield generators themselves much less, both in CPU and in raw resources, and I believe power as well. And then what you can do is you can now augment your shields with these chargers and capacitors, each costing more CPU and more power, giving you an option to both customize and balance your own shields depending on the role of your vessel. Now, the Vendetta being a reasonably quick and maneuverable ship, I want something that's got a pretty decent shield, but I think also charging capacity is probably more important. The problem I have with the Vendetta here in this particular example is that, well, I built it without these shield capacitors in mind, so there isn't actually any room in the ship for them, so we're going to have to make some room. Not only that, is we're going to have to figure out exactly how we're going to add these shield generators in here, and also bring the CPU back under control, which is not easy to do. And so this is your first challenge that you're probably going to find with a lot of your favorite builds as well. Let's see what we can do. First of all, I'm going to bring in a bunch of these capacitors and chargers, and we're going to just kit out the ship as best we can to the shield levels that we kind of want. Using God mode here and just sort of clipping into the hull, I can kind of find some areas in the hull where space isn't particularly well used. For example, this wall here seems to have quite a nice little gap behind it. So I think you're probably going to have to do the same or similar activity in your own builds, is try and find where you've got kind of little bits of space maybe in the hull. I don't want to use anything forward because that's That's kind of armor. So we're going to be trying to keep it towards the rear section without actually, you know, conflicting with things like fuel tanks or getting too close to them. But at the end of the day, we still want this thing to be able to handle some damage and compromised hull. So we're going to chop into this area here and chop in past that elevator there, and I think that's probably as far as I'm going to go. This isn't going to give us a huge amount of room, but it'll give us enough for a couple of these devices. I gotta say as well, Vermilion's done a wonderful job on these devices. They look fantastic. We're going to see if we can chop down as well. I think we can go down. And then I've got this pipe here, which I can very easily modify or just take out entirely. And that's going to give us quite a nice little space there. First of all, we're going to add in some capacitors. This is going to give us a nice overall shield capacity. And then I'm going to have an equal amount of chargers as well, which is going to give us some rapid charging. Now I'm going to have to do some magic around here to kind of reintegrate this in, because I mean I've got this wall here and now I've got this thing the other side of this elevator shaft, which isn't great either. So I'm going to have a play around with that and see what we get. But let's have a look, see what that's done to our shields and our CPU. So shields are now at 18,000, which is reasonably respectable. And with 3 chargers, that means they should charge reasonably quickly as well. But look what it's done to our CPU. We're now 273,000 over CPU. It's getting a little out of hand, and this ship is designed to be something that you would use in order to get the kind of cores and stuff that you need in order to expand your CPU beyond the initial limits. So what the hell are we going to do now? This is the problem. So there are several options we can do. I've already got crew in the ship, and these guys will reduce CPU usage by about 2,500 per crew member. Obviously I've already taken advantage of that, so that's not going to be an option for me. What I'm going to have to do is have a look, first of all, at the CPU page. Let's see what's really consuming all that CPU. Advanced thrusters, turrets, generators, drive thrusters, and the shield boosters themselves that I've just put in are 150,000. Look at these advanced laser cannons here. They might be something that we could possibly live without, and maybe we could actually trim some of the turrets down. The Vendetta has got quite a lot of firepower. After all, it is designed to, you know, kill things. So we might be able to skim on some of the turrets and maybe use lighter versions of them. And this is something maybe that you guys might have to do as well. Let's have a look and see what we've got here. Along the flanks here, we've got these retractable missile turrets. And then back here, we've got a flak turret and a laser turret. Underneath, we've got these frontal cannons here. Now, they're not really there to do much. They're there to be the first things that essentially get targeted and destroyed by any incoming fire. As are these laser cannons. These laser cannons, once the shields go down, don't last long at all. So they're a very expensive, from a CPU point of view, kind of decoy. But if we look inside the hull here, I've got more than just those as decoys. I've got small generators in here also drawing fire to the front of the ship. The whole design of this ship is designed to take damage on the nose and then spread it out to the right and left. That was the design. So I can use that knowledge to perhaps skim off some extra CPU that's only really being used as a fancy decoy system. These cannon turrets can go, and we can replace them with much cheaper, CPU-wise, colonist bolter turrets. Now these things are fantastic. 2,000 CPU a turret. Let's compare that to a normal projectile turret. I have to actually go into it and right click it. 12,500 for a cannon turret. Now if we take a look at the cannon turret and the bolter turret here, we'll actually see that this thing does 550 damage at around 71 RPM. And this thing, the cannon turret, does 250 damage at 120 RPM. So it does about 500, I suppose, if you consider the RPM. Yeah, and this one does about the same, a little bit more, I think. But the CPU difference is really just completely transforming that bolter turret into something that's actually very worthwhile. Now, the only problem with the bolter turrets is that you can't build them, you have to buy them from colonists, or you can salvage them, I think, off of some pirate ships or even colonist ships if you really don't care about reputation or whatever. But they don't have a retractable model either, so you do have to fill that kind of, if you are using retractables like I am, fill that kind of void in there with a bit more combat steel, but that's fine, that actually adds more armor in the end. And there we go, we've replaced our cannon turrets with much cheaper bolter turrets, and that's going to start lowering our CPU down nicely. Now we can have a look at some of the other turrets, and like I said, I think we can probably get rid of these laser cannons. It is a bit of a loss. We're not going to have a directed laser weapon in order to lower shields. We're going to have to rely entirely on our turrets to do that now. But if we are able to add more CPU to the ship later on, we can add them back in. We can definitely do that. So I'm going to have a little tinker with these turrets now and see if I can just trim them down to lighter versions and more kind of economic versions of turrets that may be able to get us back into that magic 2.1 million CPU with the extra shield boosters and stuff that we've now added. The thing to try and remember is to really explore the new weapon systems available in the game. Some of them are not particularly difficult to get. They're not something that you can build straight away. For example, the Sentinel Flak turrets here, you need to have the schematic, which you can buy from a UCH quartermaster, but you will need to get the credits first. Now, this ship is kind of late enough in the game that that's going to be more than possible in most cases. The Sentinel Flak turret, for example, has a CPU of 10,000, which is much cheaper than a standard Flak turret. These things are great against drones, but not much use about anything else. So make sure you use the right grouping and targeting parameters when you set these things up. The other things to remember as well is things like the positron beams. They're higher CPU than a laser turret, but they might be able to replace 2 laser turrets, for example, or a laser turret and a laser cannon. And things like the brand spanking new Mx4 Rapid Torpedo Launchers you might find a little bit more useful than the original artillery cannons, which do more missing than anything else. Great against static targets, completely useless if you're moving and the thing you're shooting is moving. So a lot of CPU for not a lot of damage in the grand scheme of things. Be a little bit more creative about your weapon choices and you can get that CPU down no problem. What I've done here to the Vendetta is we've managed to get the CPU down under 2.1 million. And in fact, if we add a few more crew to the ship, we might even be able to get another shield capacitor installed somewhere. Now, what I've done is obviously we've got the Sentinel cannons here. I've even still managed to keep some of the laser cannons. These are Sentinel Flak cannons. Sorry, these are the Colonist bolters. These are the Sentinel Flaks. Same model, different turret. Now, most importantly, what I've done is I've taken the artillery cannons off. Those big honking stupid artillery cannons, like I said, were kind of a waste on this ship. So the top one I've replaced with the new Mx4 Rapid Torpedo Launchers, which once again require you to unlock the schematic, or rather buy the schematic from the UCH quartermasters. No problem, they're expensive, but once you've got it, you can build them, and the ammunition is not even that bad. The other one down here is an EMP Cruise Missile. I've gone for EMP to kind of bolster the fact that I've lost my laser cannons. EMP Cruise Missiles are effective against shields, so hopefully that means that my shield downing capacity in this ship is still good. Still, I've got 4 laser cannons nevertheless, and also 2 positron beams on each side. There we go. So actually we've managed to keep quite a lot of firepower just by ridding ourselves of the laser cannons and our traditional artillery cannons, using some of the lower damage weaponry that's useful for getting rid of drones like the Sentinel Flak, and lowering our CPU massively by putting our decoy weapons down to the colonist bolter turrets. It means it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get like the materials we need in order to build this thing. Let's have a quick look actually at the stats page, because this will tell us exactly what we're going to need to build it. The Mx4 Rapid Torpedo Launchers are in the blueprint requirement, so we're going to have to build 4 of those and put them in the factory. The EMP's cruise missiles are the same, as are the colonist bolter turrets, and of course the alien and human crew. That's standard as it is anyway. A lot of this ship we're going to go after and buy schematics or components in order to populate the factory in order to spawn it in. But like I said before, this is a CV that's late gamer or mid to late game enough that shouldn't be a problem. And now we have a pretty decent combat vessel under 2.1 million CPU with more shields than it started out with. Plus also, like I said, if we just add a few more crew, let's see if we can do this now. We can get that CPU down enough to add another capacitor. So maybe maybe I could put Dr. Jeff in there. I don't know. We'll have Susan up on the bridge, perhaps. If we don't already have a Susan up on the bridge. I don't think we do. I don't know. Go stand there and look important, Susan. You get the kind of idea. That should bring our CPU down to 83,000. I think that... Oh, actually, I might have done this wrong, guys. I think these are 25,000, aren't they? Damn, yeah, they're 25,000. I thought they were 15. Okay, so if we add one more of these things, then we will go back over CPU. But I suppose we could just repeat the process again and see if we can actually just trim a little bit more off. Then we get rid of this corner here and rotate that. Maybe you can go in there. There you go. There's another capacitor. That should take our shields up to 24,000 now, but we're 8,000 over. You know, if we can add 4 more crew members in and around the place, then we'll be golden. Let's add a couple of security guards in here. And don't forget, crew can just be purchased from UCH space stations, that sort of thing. So if we use some alien dudes now as well, just diversify. Yeah, diversity is beautiful and all that stuff. Let's have a couple of chatting aliens over here. Having a little, you know. There's 2 aliens here. They should actually reduce by 5,000 in theory, shouldn't they? Think about it. There's 2 of them. I don't think that's going to fly somehow. Yeah, but you get the idea. So we what are we at now? We're under CPU again. Sorry, 2098. Oh, perfect. Yeah, because we added the capacitor in already, didn't we? Bingo. There we go. So we got 24,000 shield capacity. Let's see how fast that charges up, because we've got some charges in there as well, haven't we? And we should also be able to monitor our generator usage. This is another thing that you can also do. If your ship is over powered with generators cost a lot of CPU. So if you can trim your generators down by trialing shield capacity and thruster usage and things like that, then you can trim some generators off, and that will save you a lot of CPU as well. You just have to be a lot more kind of thorough, I think, with the choice of devices and stuff. That's actually charging really nicely. It's doing a few percent and then having a little pause and then a few more percent. Yeah, that's fine. That's great. That's a good charging rate, actually. Very nice. So there we go. There's the Vendetta. It is now ready for 1.7 Reforged Eden, using new weapon systems exclusive to 1.7, using some of the older ones, the bolters and the Sentinel Flaks with the lower CPU. They do less damage, but these ones in particular are not particularly useful, so that's fine. Plus, we've actually got an upgrade with these positron beams as well, and we've managed to keep our 6 missile launchers on the sides and some EMP launchers on the bottom. These Mx4 Torpedo Launchers, if you did miss my stream, these things are incredibly effective against hull. Useless against shields, completely useless against shields, but if you've got a hull to shoot at, they're amazing. So I think they're going to do more damage than the 4 artillery cannons I had. No problem at all. And that's it. That's pretty much it. That's what you have to do in order to get your ships ready for the new version of Reforged Eden. Now, I've already done the same thing to a couple of others, and the bigger and more complicated the ship gets, the more harsh you kind of have to be. In this one, the Leviathan here, I'm still over CPU by 62,000. I have been completely unsuccessful, shall we say, but there are still some things I can do. I can change these out to colonist bolters, for example, rather than the miniguns. I can change these missile turrets out to the colonist light missile launchers. I can swap these lasers out for GATs, and so on and so forth. I could remove the artillery gun and have more torpedo launchers, and so on and so forth. Everything that we just did with the Vendetta, we can still do the Leviathan. But one of the biggest and possibly saddest things I had to do to Leviathan was neuter it, I suppose. I had to take 2 of its mighty thrusters away, because these are drive thrusters and they're extremely expensive on the CPU. And so yeah, we had to slow it down a bit. Now, it was already overpowered in forward momentum anyway, forward power, so it's not too much of a loss. Visually, it is a shame. We've also lost... hang on, I did some other stuff. Oh yeah, the middle thruster on the side there. It had a lot of side thrust that it didn't need, and a lot of lift thrust it didn't need as well. So I really trimmed the thrusters hard on the Leviathan here. Now, if I do the same with the turrets, I think we can get it under that 2.1 million, absolutely no problem. And we got ourselves there a decent-sized ship that we can go use as our sort of main ship well into kind of late game. I've already used crew, and I've also removed some of the constructors, so it's back down to just 2. And the repair bay is gone as well, because that is crazy expensive. So you do have to kind of neuter your ships, especially if they're coming from vanilla. The Leviathan here is a vanilla ship. So it's going to be overpowered in a lot of ways, and we're going to have to address that to get it into Reforged Eden. The Jupiter here, which has just hit the workshop, this has been transformed into a Reforged version as well, and this one was much more successful. It was already actually at about 2.4 million, I think it was, when I first brought it in. As you can see, we're about 50,000 under CPU at the moment. These are colonist bolter turrets. A lot of them I've changed from Gatling to the bolter turrets. As you can see, anything that looks like a flak turret there is probably a bolter. These ones are the Sentinel flak turrets, so again, less CPU, and these guys are the colonist light missile turrets, which again, a massive reduction in CPU usage. Reduction in damage as well, but the Jupiter is not a combat ship, it's a drop ship. So, yeah, don't get shot, I guess. It's designed to drop tanks, and the tanks are designed to get shot, not this thing. So, be mindful of what your build is all about. What's it supposed to do? The combat ship I just showed you over there, the Vendetta, you can do things to that if you prioritize how the turret layout and what type of turrets you're going to be using. Non-combat ships like this, you might have to trim down on constructors, thrusters, or just use a lot lighter turrets that just can really just deal with drones and stuff. So like I said, the Jupiter is on the workshop, but it is the vanilla version on the workshop. The Reforged one will be coming soon. I'm still sort of fiddling around with it. As you can see, I've used crew as well to help lower that CPU, but I have managed to keep most of the ships kind of vanilla properties. I even managed to upgrade its thrusters as well. It had 2 advanced thrusters or medium thrusters there, large ones, sorry, and it now has a drive thrust, which gives it a higher top speed and better maneuvering. The other 2 are still the same. The Gladiator here. This thing is stupid. It's an old favorite of mine, and yeah, it's basically a ship I built. Was like, okay, what is the most ridiculous thing? I just wanted a big broadside battleship made purely of combat steel that could take an absolute beating. This thing was built before shields were a thing, so its armor is designed thusly, you know. So everything is just encased in layers and layers and layers of combat steel, which makes it extremely heavy. And it is flanked by artillery turrets on both sides, as well as flak turrets. It is designed to do an extraordinary amount of damage to, well, anything that comes near it. Top is laser turrets that down shields in seconds, and bottom is gat turrets, which more so down shields in seconds, less so in Reforged. So how the hell are we going to get this thing that is not carefully designed, that is not built for moderation, into a state where it could be used for Reforged? Well, do not fear, ladies and gentlemen, because Reforged has these wonderful things called auxiliary cores and quantum cores, which you can get through a variety of activities. However, they are difficult to get. But if you've got a big honking stupid battleship that you do want to bring into the world of Reforged Eden to enjoy the extra content, complexity and stuff available, you can. You just have to work at it a bit. And we're going to see if we can get that done in here, while also sort of simultaneously to kind of trim this thing down a little bit into something rather sensible. Now, what we're probably going to find is if we try and move this thing, it's going to go at 3 miles an hour, because it weighs so much. Look at that, 16 meters a second is our top speed. That's with 2 drive thrusters and 6 large thrusters and a cluster of mediums as well, by the look of it. So the first thing we're going to have to address is is the forward thrust. I think we're probably going to have to rip out this thruster arrangement and this thruster arrangement and replace it with drive thrusters just to get it to move. I don't think replacing all the hull down to combat steel is the way to go. We should be able to get a big armored behemoth working fine. So, leave it with me. I think we'll start with the thrusters, and then I might reduce these flak cannons to sentinels to get the CPU down, and these with light missile launchers from the colonist faction, and possibly bolter turrets on the bottom, and so on and so forth. We might trim some of the generators because I believe it has... oh, well, it's got 3 advanced generators in here. We'll see if we can get it down to 2, but I doubt it. And we'll need to up the shields, of course, with the new shield technology, and anything else I can trim out of it, like constructors, although it only has 2 as it is. And I think eventually we will be able to get this monstrosity of a boat into the world of Reforged. Now, see, the biggest challenge with the Gladiator here is, well, aside from getting it to have any kind of forward momentum whatsoever, is actually the power generation. So, if I turn the shields on while maneuvering, you can see my generator usage on the bottom right really kind of peaking. That's with 4 advanced generators. Well, this kind of nicely segues me onto one of the newest features of Reforged Eden, which is very cool, and that is a new source of power. Let me just bring this up for you. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the fusion reactor. Now, this is a beast of a device. You can see it costs 4 million CPU straight off the bat. Anyway, sorry, my mistake, 400,000 CPU. I can't count zeros. Don't make fun of me. It's genetic. And it produces a whopping great 500 kilowatts of power. Now, the advanced generator here, the existing one, only produces 95. Now I've got 4 of these things sitting in there, which means, well, they're producing under 400 kilowatts. Now I can get a little bit more juice out of the fusion reactor if I replace all 4 of them with one of those. So let's do that. Let's go whippity wobbity whippity boop. There we go. That's gonna happen. Now, the other problem is, of course, this thing is freaking enormous, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of redecorating in here in order to fit the damn thing in, but that shouldn't be a problem here in creative mode. There we go. Bingo. Big fat generator. Now, obviously, you know, the surroundings suck. But I'm sure we can come up with some very cool looking reactor rooms with this bad boy. It is a good looking asset after all. Thank you very much, Vermilion, for spending your own money on actually purchasing that asset. That is legendary levels of commitment. We're all very grateful for that. Right, so if we put this thing to full throttle, oh boy, oh boy, the thing's still exceeding by 43% in some cases. Well, okay then, so we're gonna need maybe that fusion reactor plus a couple of more reactors as well. Now, I have messed around with it. We can see that actually we're doing pretty well on CPU as a result of what I mentioned before, the auxiliary cores. Let me just level this thing out so God mode isn't weird. I have stuffed the ship full of these wonderful auxiliary cores here, which reduces the overall CPU. And here we have all of the shield generators. This is producing a whopping 131,000 shields. That's pretty tanky. Unfortunately, due to the sheer mass of the Gladiator, it can only move at about 45 meters per second, and that's after I've added that many drive thrusters to it. So, yeah, you really do have to pick and choose your ships. If you are bringing in something as ridiculous as this, bear in mind making it move is probably going to be your biggest challenge. Next to that, power generation. So we're going to have to add a couple more of the advanced generators back in. In fact, I think I could probably get away with just one. So let's go ahead and just plonk that down there. And let's see if this now cooks the generators or not. Should be reasonably good now, in theory. Fingers crossed. And this is before it's actually choosing to fire any kind of like... Now I am boosting, that's not fair. I am boosting, and you shouldn't be boosting while you're charging shields. So if I just press forward normally, everything seems fine. Once the shields are charged, I can then boost. Yeah, boosting is going to be a problem. Okay, but normal operation without the boosting, everything seems okay. That's good. That's really good. Okay, let's bring this thing back to a stop and I'll show you all the changes I've managed to do. But believe it or not, this ship is now Reforged ready. Yes, it's slow as all balls, but it works. It freaking works. Okay, so I kept the artillery guns because they're kind of the main feature of the ship. Having a broadside of 10 artilleries in your face is quite fun. I've swapped these flaks out for positron beams because I've ditched all the laser turrets on the top for Sentinel flak cannons and colonist bolter cannons. That really reduced the CPU back down. Unfortunately, adding all the drive thrusters to make the damn thing managed to lift CPU all the way back up again. Before I added any auxiliary cores in, this thing was topping out at 8 million CPU. Well, we knew that was going to happen with something this redonkulous, so that's fine. These auxiliary core construction kits are quite expensive, but at the moment, and this is subject to change, ladies and gentlemen, so don't take my word for this or the tooltip in front of you, but they take 1 million CPU off. Once again, that may change in the live actual released version. As it stands, by taking 1 million off, that has managed to save me a lot of CPU, but not only do you get the cores with these things, you can also use auxiliary core power to reduce your the amount of power that your ship uses by 500 watts, or shield, which increases your shield capacity by another 5,000. Very cool. So with the cores added and a little mix match of these two, we've actually got a pretty damn good performing ship when it comes to, you know, tanking the living bejesus out of things, which really is what this ship is all about. Add to that positron beams, which can rip shields down in no time, and artillery cannons, which can blast a hole the size of the Death Star into most ships. We should have a pretty formidable little beast here. It's just a shame that it probably can't get up to the speed required to even warp out the system. It is what it is. Dear, this thing is just stupid. And with that many drive thrusters, it still doesn't move. Anyway, you gotta pick and choose your boats. Like I said, Gladiator here, unfortunately, as wonderful as it would be to bring it into Reforged, is probably never going to happen. Nevertheless, I hope that has given you guys the idea of what sort of things you might need to do in order to bring your own ships into Reforged, and proves that if determined enough, you can actually get pretty much any ship, redonkulous or otherwise, into Reforged's more strict kind of rules around thrusters, CPU, weight, and all the things that affect ships. Yeah, vanilla builds, they need some modification. Anyway, ladies and gents, that is going to be all from me today. I hope this has been useful, helpful in some way in preparing you for what's coming for Reforged Eden 1.7. If it hasn't, let me know down below. Thanks very much for watching. It is greatly appreciated. And as always, hopefully, I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.